Hi, Gerhard Bloom, once again, looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So if you're watching mainstream media, likely you've heard of the young males having stolen a vehicle, drive over and kill a retired police officer riding his bike at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, you probably weren't made aware that the two participants, the one driving, the one videotaping this tragic episode, they're both laughing. They deliberately target this white retired police officer on a bike. They had no idea who he was, but they could obviously tell he was white. And he's not the only person they had hit that day. Fortunately, the other person they hit about a half hour previous to that survived. This guy didn't. These young men, black young men. And no, race isn't peripheral to this issue at all. I was just hearing some discussion on a podcast about, young men doing what they're doing. No. Just, several months back, perhaps a year or more, a black man in a car swerves out of his way to hit a man on a bike. Oh, an accident. No, he jumps out of the car and stabs this guy to death, who was a doctor, a white doctor. Why am I bringing up this race issue? There's been numerous attacks, involving death or just black people swarming white people and attacking them, putting the beats on them. There was it's like some 7-Eleven store or some group of black men run in. One black man just starts viciously attacking, punching, kicking, mercilessly, setting upon her, and his buddies are laughing as they're gathering up the goodies to run out of the store. Now, I've said this before, this is a very dangerous game, this entire oppression narrative game. Telling people, black people, that their failed lives are the result of systemic oppression. It's not, it's black culture. Check out my video on the oppression narrative. This gets very interesting. I just finished a book, absolutely excellent. Out of the melting pot into the fire, right here. He discusses affirmative action programs around the world. Sri Lanka, Rwanda, former Yugoslavia, where people are split into tribalizing groups. They don't talk with one another. They have mutual suspicions of one another. The government provides benefits and access to resources versus the other group. So there's a zero-sum competitive game. And the clearest parallel that I can see to what's happening in the United States is Rwanda. Belgian colonialists came in, and the Tamils had access to better education just by virtue of accident to where they happened to be located geographically. They got better schooling, and consequently, the colonial powers hired more of them for administrative offices and so forth. And the Hutus, farmers, less well off, but there wasn't a great deal of racial and tribalistic animosity between these communities. They were virtually indistinguishable. And then some leftist colonial comes in, still under the Belgians, and says, oh, these Hutus are being actively discriminated against, and they weren't. They were hired in less numbers because they didn't have the requisite education as an accident of circumstance, not deliberate oppression. At any rate, convinced the Hutus that they had been oppressed, systemically oppressed, issued ID cards identifying Hutu and Tutsis. The Hutus were now the beneficiaries of affirmative actions. That's right, preferences, tribalistic preferences. In the schools, this should remind you of what's going on in the United States. Teachers would start classes identifying who the Hutus were and who were the Tutsis. And the Hutu children were told in explicit terms that, you see these Hutu kids? Well, their parents are oppressing you and have oppressed your ancestors. They're holding you back. This was a powder keg. So the Hutus, who were actually receiving benefits and subsidies and preferences, unleashed a murderous campaign of violence. in about a month, over 1 million people were slaughtered with very crude weapons. In terms of demographics, in relative terms, the Hutus killed more Tutsis than Hitler and the Nazi machine did with the concentration camps and gas chambers. You can't do that without the active involvement and engagement of the vast majority of the Hutu populace. And there were Hutus who said, no, or they were married to a Tutsi. They were slaughtered. And by slaughtered, I mean hacked to death with machetes, and it was awful. Little children slaughtered. Huge numbers of people. Once you start this toxic notion of diversity and oppression, and this is what we're teaching kids in school, only it won't be the Black community that kills and it takes over white America. White America represents over 60% of the population. The Black community, 13%. This guy here, I want to stop this inevitable descent into mass violence, because the subway attack, right? Black man gets in a subway, releases some smoke bombs and starts shooting people. I think nearly a dozen people were shot without mercy, right? And these Black kids roaming through the streets. This is inevitably, if this does not stop, going to set off a retaliatory cycle of merciless violence. I talk about in this book, police on patrol, they're sitting in the patrol car, a Black man will run up to the window and shoot them dead. Murder, cold-blooded murder, because of course the police are agents of systemic oppression. Well, they're not. We need to stop this toxic, divisive, and racist ideology. Segregated dorms for Black people because they need safe spaces. They can't be around white people. Graduation ceremonies. Dividing people in the corporate world. You white employees, you're going to go off to learn about your white supremacy and how you can't help but be an oppressor. This is fueling resentment. And at some point, that resentment will explode into, retaliatory violence. And the Black community, they can't win this fight. They can't. And it's not a fight we should want to fight. I've got Black friends in my life. I met many wonderful Black people. And some I've met awful white people, and given population disparities, most of the little shit rats I've run into my life have been white. But when racial tribalized violence starts, you don't get to decide. Do you think I can walk into the Black inner city and say, oh, no, I'm not a white oppressor, I'm not a racist, I don't play that game? They're going to go, who the fuck is this clown? And they'll shoot me. No. We need to stop this. We need to stop it now. Blacks are not being systemically oppressed. Thomas Sowell, Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter, some brilliant scholars have looked at the data. The data suggests that the Black community is holding itself back, right? The advances they made at the end of slavery and during Jim Crow were astonishing cultural achievements. It was Lyndon Johnson and his Great Society, seducing people to get on welfare. So you have generational welfare dependence. You've got the stigmatizing of school achievement. You've got blaming whitey or Asians. There was a couple of years ago now, but these events continue. 2 Black women attack some unknown Asian woman, elderly, with a hammer on the streets of New York. There was another incident where the Black man had a rock in a sock, a tube sock, swung it around as this Asian woman was crossing the street, hit her in the face with this thing, dropped her to the ground as though she was shot, could have killed her. Or the Black man walking in New York, chest kicks this elderly Black woman. When she's on the ground and she looks up in shock, he soccer kicks her in the face and then stomps on her and marches off like he's done some heroic deed for the sake of Black progress. I mentioned the work before by Carol Swain, a brilliant Black scholar, formerly out of Vanderbilt. She had to leave because of the woke fucking nonsense there. The new white nationalists, they love this. This is fueling their recruitment drives. And once again, when racial tribalistic violence starts, you don't get to decide. It's like if I get sent to a prison in California, am I going to eat with the black criminals who want to kill me? Or I'm going to eat with the white neo-Nazis who are going to protect me? Or I'm going to go over to the Hispanic gangs that want to kill me as well? Guess where I'm eating? I don't have a choice. I want to survive. That's my team. This is awful. It needs to stop. Stop playing this game. You got Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, burn that thing. You know, Ibram X. Kendi, how to be an anti-racist. It's nonsense. Trivial nonsense. Or alternatively, you could read those books and discover for yourself how absolutely stupid it is. And people pretend to believe it. White, rich, liberals pretend to believe it until the violence comes for them. Till it comes for them, right? Anyways, thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this wasn't too ranty. Do apologize for the swears. And do check out my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It will give you the data. It will give you the data. I've read the necessary books, half a dozen or more books by Thomas Sowell, a couple of books by John McWhorter, and some other brilliant black scholars. So they don't have an ideological grind here. They want the truth, and so do I. And you should as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Take care now. Bye-bye.